A massive lioness lunges through the dense undergrowth, her powerful jaws clamped around the thick body of a 20-foot python. Beneath the serpent's crushing coils, a young gorilla cub gasps for its final breaths, its tiny chest barely rising. The python's muscles contract like steel cables, threatening to snap every bone in the infant's fragile body. But this desperate rescue attempt is only the beginning of an incredible story that will end with the most shocking display of interspecies respect ever witnessed in the wild. The lioness's roar echoes through the Kenyan savanna.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
As she tears at the python's muscular body, her claws raking across scales that shimmer like dark armor in the morning sun, every second counts as the young gorilla's life hangs by a thread, its small fingers weakly grasping at the air. The scene is both beautiful and terrifying. A golden predator fighting desperately against nature's perfect killing machine to save a creature that should be nothing more than a stranger. But this incredible moment of cross-species heroism is just the beginning of a story so extraordinary that wildlife experts are still struggling to explain what happened next. Because what you're about to witness will challenge everything you thought you knew about the animal kingdom and the invisible bonds that connect all living creatures. The lioness, known to local researchers as Sakai, had never shown interest in gorillas before this day. The mountain gorillas of this region typically keep to the dense forest canopy, while lions patrol the open grasslands below. Their worlds rarely intersect, and when they do, it's usually as competitors, not allies. Yet here she was, risking her own life for a baby that wasn't even her own species. But the real shock was yet to come. As Sakai fought valiantly against overwhelming odds, the forest began to tremble with approaching footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps that belonged to the most feared creature in these mountains. A 400-pound silverback gorilla whose reputation for violence was legendary among the local Maasai tribes. What this massive alpha male did when he arrived at the scene would leave experienced wildlife photographers speechless and rewrite the textbooks on animal behavior forever. It was an act so unexpected, so contrary to everything science tells us about territorial instincts and survival, that the few humans who witnessed it initially refused to believe their own eyes. But how did this lioness end up so far from her pride, deep in gorilla territory, fighting for the life of a species she'd never encountered before? To understand this miracle and the shocking events that followed, we need to go back to where it all began, just 3 hours earlier in the peaceful Aberdare Mountains. 3 hours earlier, the morning mist still clung to the ancient trees of the Aberdare Mountains like a soft gray blanket. The forest was alive with the gentle symphony of dawn, the melodic calls of hornbills, the rustling of leaves as colobus monkeys leaped between branches, and the distant trumpeting of elephants making their way to the watering holes below. In a sun-dappled clearing nestled between towering cedar trees, a small troop of mountain gorillas was beginning their daily routine. Led by Kessie, a magnificent silverback whose silver-streaked coat caught the filtered sunlight, the family moved with the unhurried grace of creatures who had called this forest home for generations. His mate, Jengo, kept a watchful eye on their newest addition, a curious 6-month-old cub named Baraka, whose name meant blessing in the local Swahili dialect. Baraka was everything his name suggested. Born during the rainy season when food was abundant, he had grown into a playful bundle of energy with bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of his forest world. While the adults foraged for wild celery and bamboo shoots, Baraka tumbled through the undergrowth, chasing butterflies and practicing the chest-beating displays he'd seen his father perform. Meanwhile, 5 miles away across the valley, Sakai the lioness was experiencing her own peaceful morning. She had become separated from her pride 3 days earlier during a failed hunt, when a massive buffalo had scattered the group in different directions. Now alone, she had been tracking through unfamiliar territory, following game trails that led higher into the mountains than any lion had ventured in decades. The golden-maned female was no ordinary lioness. At 7 years old, she was in her prime, a skilled hunter with an unusually strong maternal instinct that had made her the pride's most devoted protector of cubs. Local wildlife photographers had nicknamed her the Guardian for her fierce dedication to protecting not just her own young, but any vulnerable creature she encountered. Neither Sakai nor the gorilla family could have imagined that their separate, peaceful worlds were about to collide in the most extraordinary way possible. The stage was set for an encounter that would defy every rule of nature. As the morning progressed, subtle changes began to ripple through the forest ecosystem. The hornbill's cheerful calls grew more sporadic, replaced by an unusual stillness that seemed to press against the trees like a held breath. Experienced trackers would have recognized the signs immediately. The forest was sensing danger. Baraka, blissfully unaware of any threat, had discovered a fallen log that made the perfect playground. He rolled and tumbled over its moss-covered surface, occasionally glancing back to ensure his mother Django was still within sight. But his playful squeaks were gradually leading him further from the safety of the troop, drawn by the irresistible lure of exploration. The log sat at the edge of a natural clearing where two distinct ecosystems met. On one side lay the dense mountain forest where the gorillas thrived, with its thick canopy and abundant vegetation. On the other stretched a more open woodland that bordered the savanna grasslands below, territory that belonged to very different predators. Meanwhile, Sakai had picked up an intriguing scent trail. Her powerful nose detected something unusual in the morning air. Not the familiar musk of antelope or buffalo, but something sweeter, more primal. It was the scent of young life, vulnerable and unguarded. Her maternal instincts, honed by years of protecting cubs, immediately went on high alert. As she moved through the unfamiliar terrain, following ancient game paths carved by generations of elephants, Sakai noticed other disturbing signs. The usual chatter of vervet monkeys had fallen silent. Even the ever-present buzz of insects seemed muted, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. What neither Sakai nor the gorilla family realized was that they were all being watched. Hidden in the dense undergrowth near the fallen log, perfectly camouflaged among the dappled shadows and twisted roots, lay one of Africa's most patient and deadly predators. The African rock python had been motionless for hours, its cold-blooded body absorbing the warmth of the morning sun as it waited for the perfect opportunity. The invisible threads of fate were drawing all the players together, setting the stage for an encounter that would test the very boundaries of survival and compassion. The strike came without warning. One moment Baraka was playfully batting at a colorful beetle, and the next, he was trapped in the lightning-fast coils of the massive python. The serpent's attack was a masterpiece of predatory precision, silent, swift, and devastatingly effective. The 18-foot African rock python had been waiting for exactly this moment. As Baraka tumbled closer to the fallen log, the snake's heat-sensing organs had locked onto the young gorilla's warm body. In less than 2 seconds, powerful muscles wrapped around the cub's tiny torso like living rope, immediately beginning the deadly process of constriction. Baraka's playful chirps transformed into piercing screams of terror that cut through the forest silence like a blade. The python's coils tightened with each of the cub's exhales, following the ancient rhythm of suffocation that had claimed countless victims over millions of years of evolution. From the clearing where the troop was foraging, Django's head snapped up at the sound of her baby's distress. Her maternal instincts exploded into action as she crashed through the undergrowth, her 200-pound frame moving with desperate urgency. But the thick forest vegetation slowed her progress, branches tearing at her fur as she fought to reach her child. Kisi, the massive silverback, was even further away, investigating a strange scent near the forest edge. His deep, rumbling call of alarm echoed through the trees as he began his own frantic rush toward the crisis. But precious seconds were already ticking away. The python, sensing the approaching chaos, adjusted its grip and began to retreat toward the dense cover of the forest floor. Its primitive brain calculated only survival. Secure the prey, find cover, complete the kill. The snake's muscles contracted rhythmically, each squeeze bringing Baraka closer to unconsciousness. But the forest had one more player yet to reveal herself. Sakai had been tracking the sweet scent of youth when Baraka's screams reached her ears, every fiber of her being lioness, mother, protector, ignited with purpose. She had never encountered a gorilla before, but the sound of a baby in mortal danger transcended all species barriers. As Sakai burst into the clearing, the scene before her triggered something deeper than instinct. It awakened a profound maternal memory that had been buried in grief for months. The sight of the tiny gorilla wrapped in the python's deadly embrace, transported her back to the most devastating day of her life.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
6 months earlier, Sekai had given birth to 2 cubs of her own. She had named them Zuri and Jensi, beautiful and brave in Swahili. They were her first offspring, and she had devoted herself completely to their protection and care. But the African wilderness is unforgiving, even to the most dedicated mothers. A flash flood during the rainy season had swept both cubs away while she was hunting to feed them. The loss had transformed Sekai from a carefree young lioness into something harder, more purposeful. She had spent months wandering alone, unable to return to her pride, carrying the weight of a mother's love with nowhere to direct it. The other lionesses had tried to comfort her, but grief had built walls around her heart that seemed impossible to breach. Now, staring at Baraka's terrified face as he struggled against the python's crushing grip, Sekai saw not just a gorilla cub, but every vulnerable baby she had failed to save. The cub's dark eyes, wide with fear and pleading for help, mirrored the helplessness she had felt watching the floodwaters carry away her own children. The python, meanwhile, was methodically increasing its pressure. Each coil worked independently, tightening when Baraka exhaled, maintaining pressure when he tried to breathe. The snake's black eyes showed no emotion, no malice, only the cold calculation of a perfect predator designed by evolution to kill through patient suffocation. Baraka's struggles were growing weaker. His tiny fingers, which moments before had been playfully exploring his world, now clawed desperately at the air. His breathing became shallow and rapid, the body's futile attempt to gather oxygen before the inevitable silence. For Sekai, this was more than a rescue. This was redemption. This was her chance to save the child she couldn't save before. Sekai faced a decision that went against every survival instinct encoded in her DNA. Lions and pythons were both apex predators, and engaging one in combat was potentially fatal. The African rock python was nearly twice her length, with crushing power that could easily snap her ribs or suffocate her just as efficiently as it was killing the gorilla cub. But as she watched Baraka's movements grow weaker, his desperate gasps becoming more shallow, something fundamental shifted inside her. The lioness who had lost everything found her purpose in this moment of impossible choice. She could walk away, preserve her own life, and let nature take its course. Or she could risk everything for a baby that wasn't even her own species. The decision took less than a heartbeat. With a roar that shook the very leaves on the trees, Sekai launched herself at the python. Her powerful jaws clamped down on the snake's thick body just behind its head, her canine teeth seeking the vital points that would force it to release its prey. The taste of scales and cold blood filled her mouth as she bit down with the crushing force that had evolved to break the necks of wildebeest. The python's response was immediate and terrifying. Its massive body whipped around like a living whip, trying to coil around this new threat while maintaining its death grip on the gorilla cub. Sekai found herself in a deadly dance, using every ounce of her agility to avoid the snake's attempts to trap her in its coils while never releasing her own grip. The forest floor became a battlefield as the two predators rolled and thrashed through the undergrowth. Sekai's claws raked across the python's scales, searching for purchase, while her powerful hind legs kicked and pushed, trying to create enough leverage to tear the snake away from Baraka. But even as she fought with the fury of a mother defending her young, Sekai knew the terrible truth. She was running out of time. Every second that passed brought the gorilla cub closer to death, and the python showed no signs of releasing its prize. The battle intensified as Sekai adjusted her strategy. Instead of trying to kill the python outright, she focused on creating enough chaos and pain to force it to abandon its prey. Her powerful jaws maintained their grip while her claws worked like daggers, raking across the snake's muscular body in precise, calculated strikes. The python writhed and twisted, its ancient instincts warring between self-preservation and securing its meal. For millions of years, these serpents had succeeded through patience and persistence, but they had never encountered an opponent like Sekai, a lioness driven not by hunger, but by the desperate love of a mother's heart. Blood began to flow as Sekai's teeth found their mark. The python's scales, though tough, couldn't withstand the sustained assault of 4-inch canines designed to pierce buffalo hide. But the snake fought back with equal ferocity, its muscular body whipping through the air with bone-crushing force. A coil lashed across Sekai's ribs, sending a sharp crack through the forest air. Pain exploded through her side, but she held on, her jaws locked in a death grip that would have impressed her pride ancestors. Another strike caught her hind leg, nearly spinning her around, but still she maintained her hold. The python, desperate now, made a critical error. In its attempt to dislodge the attacking lioness, it momentarily loosened its grip on Baraka. The tiny gorilla gasped, sucking in precious oxygen, his chest rising and falling with renewed strength. Sakai felt the change immediately. Her enhanced hearing caught the sound of the cub's breathing, and hope surged through her exhausted body. She redoubled her efforts, shaking her massive head from side to side like a terrier with a rat, using her neck muscles to create maximum damage. The forest around them bore the scars of their battle. Saplings were snapped, undergrowth trampled, and the ground churned into muddy chaos, but neither combatant was willing to yield. The python's survival depended on securing this meal, while Sekai's very soul demanded she save this child. Then, through the sounds of their violent struggle, came a new sound that changed everything, the thunderous approach of 400 pounds of silverback gorilla. Host. Kessie's arrival was like a force of nature unleashing itself upon the forest floor. The massive silverback crashed through the undergrowth with the unstoppable momentum of a charging rhinoceros, his silver-streaked coat bristling with rage and paternal fury. His deep, guttural roars shook the very air as he assessed the chaotic scene before him. But what happened next defied every expectation of territorial aggression and species rivalry. Instead of attacking Sekai as an intruder in his domain, Casey's intelligent eyes quickly understood the situation. Here was not an enemy, but an ally fighting desperately to save his son. Without hesitation, the silverback joined the battle. His massive hands, each capable of crushing a man's skull, grabbed the python's tail section and began pulling with the force of a mechanical winch. The coordinated assault was devastating, Sekai maintaining her grip on the snake's head and neck, while Casey stretched the python's body in the opposite direction. The python, caught between two of Africa's most powerful predators, finally reached its breaking point. The calculated predator that had dominated through patient constriction found itself overwhelmed by raw force and determination. Its grip on Baraka began to weaken as its body was pulled in opposing directions. With a final, desperate wrench from both rescuers, the python's coils unraveled completely. Baraka tumbled free, gasping and coughing, his tiny chest heaving as precious oxygen flooded back into his lungs. The snake, sensing its defeat and the mortal danger it now faced, abandoned all thoughts of its meal and slithered away into the dense undergrowth with surprising speed. Django arrived moments later, scooping up her traumatized but breathing baby, checking every inch of his small body for injuries. Her gentle touches and soft grunts gradually calmed Baraka's panicked whimpers as she held him close to her chest. The immediate crisis was over. The python had retreated, the cub was alive, and the forest began to settle back into its natural rhythm. But the most extraordinary part of this incredible story was just beginning to unfold. As the adrenaline of battle began to fade, Sekai stood panting heavily, her golden coat matted with blood and dirt. Her ribs ached from the python's strike, and exhaustion weighed on her like a heavy blanket. She had expected to simply walk away now that her mission was complete, to disappear back into the forest as quietly as she had arrived. But Kessie had other plans. The massive silverback, still cradling the moment of victory, turned his attention to the lioness who had risked everything for his son. Instead of the aggressive display that wildlife experts would have predicted, the chest beating, the roaring, the territorial dominance assertion, Kessie did something that left the few birds still watching from the canopy in stunned silence. He approached Sakai slowly, deliberately, his massive frame moving with unexpected gentleness. The lioness, still catching her breath, watched him warily. Every instinct told her to retreat, to avoid confrontation with this powerful male in his own territory. But Kessie stopped just a few feet away and performed the most shocking gesture ever recorded between two apex predators of different species. He extended his enormous hand toward Sakai, palm upward, in what could only be described as an offering of peace and gratitude. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the forest held its breath. two of nature's most formidable creatures faced each other not as enemies, but as fellow parents who understood the sacred bond of protecting the innocent. What happened next would be talked about by wildlife researchers for decades to come, a moment that challenged everything science thought it knew about animal consciousness, emotion, and the invisible threads that connect all living beings when it matters most. Yochais? Sakai looked at Casey's outstretched hand for a long moment, then slowly, carefully, touched her bloodied paw to his massive palm. The contact lasted only seconds, but in that brief exchange, something profound passed between them, an acknowledgement that transcended the boundaries of species, territory, and survival instinct. It was a moment of pure recognition, parent to parent, protector to protector, soul to soul. As if sensing the sacred nature of what had just occurred, Cassie stepped back and began a gentle, chest-beating display. Not the aggressive, territorial warning that gorillas typically use, but a rhythmic, almost ceremonial drumming that seemed to honor Sakai's courage. The sound echoed through the forest like a celebration of life itself. Django, still holding Baraka close, approached cautiously and performed her own gesture of gratitude, a soft, low vocalization that needed no translation. Even little Baraka, traumatized but alive, reached out a tiny hand toward the lioness who had saved his life. Sakai spent that night at the edge of the gorilla territory, accepted for the first time since losing her own cubs. When morning came, she finally began her journey back toward the savanna, but she carried with her something she thought she had lost forever, the knowledge that love transcends all boundaries. Local Maasai elders who heard this story would nod knowingly and say it confirmed what they had always believed, that the spirits of the forest recognize no difference between species when it comes to protecting the innocent. Sometimes the greatest act of healing comes not from saving others, but from allowing ourselves to be saved by our own capacity for love. In a world that often seems divided by differences, Sakai and Casey's story reminds us that compassion is the universal language that connects all living hearts.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.